Welcome, brand builders. Your host, Angelique Bolding here. And today I have a very exciting guest, Marvin Louis, who is joining us today to talk about amplifying nonprofits and emerging leaders. So he comes to us with a really vast experience within the nonprofit world. And he's not only, he's passionate about nonprofits, but also education, leadership, and process. So he currently serves as the unit director at the Boys and Girls Club of Stamford. And in his most recent role was lead coordinator at Digital Media Connect, a collaborative of Connecticut higher education institutions focused on fostering a digital media talent pipeline for Connecticut, which sounds like a big mouthful, and that's amazing, Marvin. You've done some really exciting work in this space, and excited to talk about it today. So I want to give you, a little bit more time. I mean, given all that you've done, tell us more about your experience and kind of what led you into the path of nonprofits and digital media.
Good question. So, well, I'd like to say that, first of all, that I think a lot of the organizations sort of that I've been involved in just sort of have been pulling me towards the nonprofit sector. For example, during my high school days, my first job actually, and I think I was a sophomore or a junior, was at a nonprofit. It was called the Eurowood Center, which is where I actually work now before it became the Boys and Girls Club of Stamford. So I used to volunteer there, and I remember that's where I got my first paycheck. And at that same time, while I was a sophomore in high school, I was part of another nonprofit, which was an after-school program for high school kids, and it's called Future 5. So I used to go to that all the time, and then and I've been with Future 5 now. So I was a student, and now I'm alumni, but been with them, basically since high school all the way up until college. So, but to answer your question, I feel like I've always been around nonprofit, and while I was dealing with Future 5 and I was a student there, I would always come back and help out where I can, volunteer where I can. And now that I'm an alumni, I'm sort of involved again with, talking to the students and getting involved with the students, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, I can say nonprofit has always been around me, to simply put it. And I've always just had different opportunities to get involved in them. For example, I remember the first time, though, I joined a marketing team for a nonprofit. It was one of my friends who reached out and was like, hey, you're interested in marketing, because I've always been interested in marketing. And she was like, I'm part of this nonprofit, and, I do you want to come, come hang out, just come sit at a meeting and stuff like that. So I went, and then I immediately was just like, oh, this is super interesting, the whole giving back thing and, being part of the team. So I dove into it. And then another one of my buddies was part of a different nonprofit, or he was interested in a different nonprofit called Heart and Purpose, which I'm still a member of that nonprofit. He told me to come out to an event, and then I went, and same thing happened again. I told them I'm interested in marketing, so I want to do marketing. So nonprofit has always pulled me, if that makes sense, and even my job too. It was just a strong recommendation. My current role, it was a friend of mine from from my previous role, which again was nonprofit. So he's like, yeah, I think you'd be a great in this position. I was like, sure, let me look into it. And so I would just say that nonprofit has always been around me and been pulling me. In each organization, though, that I've been a part of, I've always, I always say that it's only the mission. It's always the mission, as to why I'm always, attracted to each of those organizations.
I think it's interesting to see how we're pulled in certain directions and our path just kind of starts to align.
Yeah.
And our purpose just unfolds.
Yeah.
These opportunities come in front of us, and everything falls into place sometimes. So,
I totally agree.
Yeah. And having the heart to, always want to be helping people in some capacity, I think is, obviously very admirable. And, the nonprofit world needs people like you and people that are, focused in on trying to help them grow. And especially in the digital media space, there's a lot of opportunities there.
There is.
With all of your experience, have you found, and how have you found brand amplification to contribute to the success of some of the brands and nonprofits that you've worked with?
Sure. I can speak to that, especially because I've been a part of different marketing teams for different nonprofits. Well, for example, I'd say the first thing that comes to mind with this question is me thinking about sort of the goal of the nonprofit. The first one I was, when I was part of their team, they mostly wanted volunteers. So they had a strong, strong group of supporters, strong group of donors and partners in the community, but they just wanted more people in the community to be involved. So when I think of brand amplification for an organization like that, I think of curating content to attract folks to come volunteer. And I mean I got involved by word of mouth, but we just wanted to get the word out there more, to try to get folks to come in and volunteer. And so I think that my answer to this question would be, what is the goal of the nonprofit? And because brand amplification can help in many different ways. So, thinking smart about it is very important. You can take it in so many different directions. You could be a young nonprofit that just wants to, get your stamp on your community of focus, so everyone can know who you are. Or you could be a young nonprofit but want to focus on fundraising. So I would say it's mostly about the goal of the nonprofit, and what they're trying to do, essentially. But I think brand amplification can apply to so many different areas of a nonprofit. Obviously, it's always good to have strong branding, and you have to establish yourself first. But
Right.
I think there should be like an additional goal, sort of idea with the branding.
Yeah, that makes, a lot of sense. And, my next question leads into, with all the different modes of outreach and fundraising, especially,
Sure.
I would think that marketing would be very important to nonprofits. I guess to that degree, though, what role does it play, and how big of a role?
In terms of what exactly?
In terms of, as far as, what percentage of fundraising is done through specific marketing efforts, and like, what are those marketing efforts? How are those diversified across channels and mediums, and
Sure.
what is the focus there?
Absolutely. Funny you asked this, because we have right now, for the nonprofit that I'm a part of, we had a Fairfield County Giving Day, and we came up with a campaign and we set a goal of, and today's the next day, and we should have the results now. But we set a goal, and it was, how do we market it, and what are the efforts? And one thing I'll say to that is, well, when it comes to marketing, first of all, data is probably going to be your best friend, especially with any nonprofit, actually, because it's good to identify your niche. Okay, so I think, so the first thing then I would say would be, just think about, well, social media is it's prevalent these days, right? So if you are marketing on social media, right, it's about figuring out which platform makes more sense for for your organization. For example, yeah, so this campaign that we just ran, right, we used multiple different platforms. For example, Instagram and email was our biggest and most useful platforms. while, we have Facebook and LinkedIn, but the focus was mostly on Instagram. And that was mostly because that's where a lot of the fundraising promotion was sort of happening. But yeah, I think that, marketing is, it's important to fundraising, but the channels that you choose, I would say that's very specific to the organization, understanding what they do, and then where you can have the biggest voice, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. You got to go where your audience is, and in the
right.
fundraising component,
That's right.
understanding your audience in any situation is always going to be key, but especially with these different platforms and where they're at, sometimes the whole mentality of like a one size fits all does not apply for social and some digital marketing efforts.
Sure.
With the fundraising efforts, and I guess here at Photify, a big component of what we do is putting the brand in the hands of all employees and sales forces and field teams, and essentially our goal is to on an enterprise level make sure that we're equipping individuals with branded assets so that they can speak on behalf of their organization.
Absolutely.
And we see a lot of the amplification through that, because then everything is not only on brand, but even the voice and the message, and how they kind of start to create their own employees as marketers. So whether you're on the sales team or you're another department, you all have access to how to speak about the brand. So in the nonprofit world, what does that look like? Because I think of, I used to volunteer for several years at the Boys and Girls Club here locally. And, you have people that are, on the ground working with the children. You have people that are, in the executive offices, doing their thing. So what do you think is the importance of having, everybody having access to help drive these fundraisers and these, donations?
I think it's that's one of the things actually that I think is super important, and I think that any nonprofit should pride themselves in, to be able to have a consistent story with anyone who's involved. Could be volunteers, it could be board members, it could be members of the organization. I think I think any organization who's doing that well should be proud of themselves. Yes. But what that looks like, I think it is definitely super important. But what that looks like is, first of all, providing your volunteers, guests, and just giving out gear whenever you can. Simply, whenever you can, however you can, and it can be something small like a bracelet or a refrigerator sticker or a laptop sticker or whatever, because I think branding is it's super. It can be very subtle, but you can be sitting at a random coffee shop and someone sees a random logo and they're just like, oh, hey, what is that? And that's your opportunity to speak, about the organization. So what that looks like is spending the time and having each and every person who's involved, on a sort of planning level, program level, to, spending the time and training them about your story, the foundation of the organization, 3 or 5 key programs that you have running, and being able to speak on the mission of the organization, to simply put it. So. And I've been part of organizations in Heart and Purpose. They do that really well. We would spend time to at some meetings, we would have, some of the members go up during presentations, and, we would ask them, questions about the brand. For example, I want to get involved with Heart and Purpose. How do I do that? Getting each member to be able to talk about something like that it seems small, but it's super important.
Impactful. Yeah.
Super impactful.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean, in saying that having even just small branded assets are something that you never know when someone's going to identify with somebody, or they're going to be like, you're out and about at a coffee shop and they see, oh, you're part of that organization too. I'm interested in it. But one of the things I like that you said is the idea of like training. and having your brand and the campaigns that you're working on as part of the process. And because I think I connect that to building culture as well.
Yes.
So when you build in that transparency of here's what our organization does, it doesn't matter what, if you're a volunteer and you're, have your feet on the ground volunteering, or you're working from the business side of things. I think having that cohesive training on what that organization is about, and to your point, driving home the mission, everybody can get behind that. Yep. And then they can take that and with the proper tools, be able to amplify what that looks like, out into the world too.
Yep. And branding wise, it gives you a consistent voice. It gives you a consistent story.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I love it. What are some other current trends that you're seeing in the nonprofit space? And, especially these landscapes with social media, they keep changing, algorithms keep changing.
Right.
So it could be, are there trends that you're seeing in digital and social? Are there trends that you're seeing offline? Especially given the fact that we just went through. I don't even know if I can say went through yet. We've been in this global pandemic and this COVID world. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. So for that, I have the perfect answer. COVID sort of took COVID came and, took away the freedom of being, so close to each other.
Yeah.
That it forced everybody to be online. Right.
Yep.
So I think the creativity, within the digital space, and when it comes to running campaigns and different stories, the creativity with social and digital definitely that is definitely a trend that I've been seeing.
Yeah.
But I think in turn that that definitely has an impact on more storytelling. And I've been seeing, so this is my answer to your question. I've been seeing a lot of more creative storytelling. For example, on social, a lot of nonprofits now are communicating better what they do because they don't have the chance to do it in person anymore. So you have no choice but to get creative online, and the smart ones will get creative and put on different ideas online, but. Yeah, the pandemic definitely had an impact on a sort of, forcing, for lack of a better term, forcing different nonprofits to get more creative, tell your story. And any nonprofit who's out there using social media, the number one advice that I would give them would be to be able to tell your story in a very simple but effective way, because you're gonna go on any social media and it's so heavy with information that you have 2 seconds to catch someone's attention. So if you're about youth, what does your picture have? Any kids in it? Does it have backpacks in it? What does it really catch my attention? Is it telling me? Is it saying youth right off the bat? So I think the content creativity content wise is definitely, I think, improved from what I've seen, but I think the storytelling has definitely been a very it's been easier to understand, at least from when I see different nonprofits post now. It's like I know I can tell what you do now by just one photo, which is, I think it's great, because before the pandemic that would be what I'd be preaching. So
everyone had to get creative. Everybody had to get creative with it, and like you said, telling your story in a simple and effective way.
Yep.
It can sometimes be the hardest thing that you have to figure out. But like you said, you nailed it. It's like we have seconds to try to engage, and we're all fighting for somebody's attention. When you have so much consumption on, I was thinking about the other day, I'm like, I have 13 different places people can message me and send me things.
I never thought of that. I've never really counted.
I had a new group that were like, all right, we're going to download this app and we're going to communicate through here. And I'm like, no.
Yep. Yep. That's very common. Yep.
Yeah. But, I think the other thing you mentioned is with social media, being able to be creative, but it also goes back to the audience aspect where even with nonprofits, you may be segmenting your marketing into a few different ways, where it's, we need to attract volunteers, we need to attract donors, we need to attract partners.
Yes.
So how that looks and what that story is and what that medium, what those graphics, what that messaging is, that's all going to be different.
It's all going to be different. It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. It's definitely a lot of work. It's like a full-time job.
Yeah.
And yeah. I would say one of the challenges actually in nonprofit is the marketing budgets half the time.
Yeah.
Because you just listed a lot of things, and all those things are important. And one thing that I'd always encourage is to at least try all different platforms and then decide which one is best for you.
Yeah.
At first, if it's local newspaper, sure. If it's always inviting your, local news channel, if it's being on podcasts, whatever it might be, I would say try it all. Yeah. Always, because marketing is the number one.
It's a series of tests.
Yeah,
it's always a series of
very
tests.
Boldly.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Marvin, they are lucky to have you, and I look forward to keeping in touch and hearing more about what you do and how you're shaking up this industry.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me, though. This was awesome. A lot of great questions, and I'm happy to be on. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, we will stay in touch.